All right. Well, welcome back to Inside BBI with John and Eric. And of course, I'm John McDevitt, and with me is senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. And Eric, we followed up the game with the Lions, with the game with the Texans. It didn't exactly go the way we had hoped. In fact, some of the things we talked about that we didn't want to see, we saw right off. But welcome aboard here this morning. What are your quick thoughts? Because we've got a guest to introduce too.
Yeah, I think, we talked about in the preview that the focus and attention was going to be on Daniel Jones and Malik Neighbors. And I think we saw both bad and good. And I think there were other good things that, we'll get into, and Cy in particular, because everyone wants to listen to what he has. So I'm just really excited Cy's on the show. But I think, a lot of people are going to be really negative, as they should be, about what happened with the quarterback. But I think there was a lot of positive on both sides of the ball that we can address too.
Well, that's a great little segue. You kind of mentioned it for those who didn't know already. We do have a guest. It is Dave Syvertsen of Ourlads Guide, and Dave, or Cy, as you're known on BBI. First off, thank you for coming on board. And why don't you tell folks who don't know a little bit about yourself, and then let's get right into the Giants.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. It's an honor, privilege to come on and just talk ball with you guys. Yeah, I'm Dave Syvertsen. I'm one of the lead scouts from Ourlads Scouting. It's one of the oldest scouting services, headed up by Dan Shanka, who worked with the Chiefs and the Eagles back in the day. He's our general manager right now, and I've been working under him for about 10 years now, and just kind of slowly but surely working my way up the food chain there. And I do it on the side. This is my side gig. I run a business out of football, and I've been doing that for a decade as well. So I've been doing kind of living these two lives, which has been awesome. And, I went from a depth chart manager there, basically just inserting heights, weights, names, hometowns, high schools, to being their main offensive analyst for their draft guide that gets sent out every year. And, we've started a YouTube channel last year. We're trying to, take some of our archaic ways and kind of make it a little bit more modern. And so I'm kind of heading that up, and with Corey Henke, who is our new CEO at Ourlads Scouting Services right now. And I've been working with Eric for man, I don't even know how many years now, but he's really kind of, I'm really a lot of gratitude and a lot of thankfulness coming from me with him, because he's really opened the door to me just putting myself out there and going through some of the good, bad, and ugly of trying to make it a little bit bigger in NFL media and scouting media, because it's such a competitive market, and the internet is forever. So everything you put out there is out there. But he's really helped me out, and the BBI community has as well. So whatever I can do to help BBI out and just spearhead some of the conversation, I'm more than willing and more than happy to do.
Well, and I just like,
go ahead, Eric.
I just like to throw this out there too. So I don't know if your viewers can see this. This is a 1988 Ourlads guide. So it shows you how long I've been getting them. I've got a stack on my desk next to me, this tall, but I can't, about this tall right now. So what I want to say is, if you're not getting Ourlads, you're really missing out. I would say I've been following the draft through draft guides since the mid 80s, and Ourlads has always been my go-to guide. The people talk about the Beast now, and I would say that's another good resource, but Ourlads, if you're not getting Ourlads, you're really missing out. And the one thing I will say about Cy, as he just said, the internet's forever. He sticks his neck out there year after year, and people will go back and they'll look at his previews of the draft, and they're pretty spot on. I mean, it's really more of a art than a science. Everybody still tries to put metrics into all of this, and there is a role, I think, for metrics, and people get into the times and the weights and all of that with especially with the combine. But it really, scouting, I think, still comes down to art. You really have to, it's a human element to it, and you have to really judge the player and stick your neck out and make a judgment. And Cy's one of the best at this, and Ourlads is one of the best at that. So I can't say enough. If you want to dive into that world, get the Ourlads guides.
Absolutely. Thanks, so with that in mind, Cy, so let's start right off. We're going to talk Giants Texans. Daniel Jones made his first appearance. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's start there. Your thoughts first on his overall play, and then maybe some things that fans might not have seen just from watching the straight broadcast.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time we've seen him in almost a year. It's about 10 months ago where he tore his ACL in Las Vegas against the Raiders, which was coming off a neck injury, which was not his first neck injury of his career. And, that's always going to be a cloud over him is the durability factor. And it was just good to see him back on the field, whether you like him or not, whether you think the Giants should have went quarterback in the draft or not. It was good to see the starting quarterback back on the field in live action. And Brian Daboll said that part of their game plan, maybe the main focus of that game, was to get him to drop back into deep dropbacks and feel the pass rush in real live action where guys are, pinning their ears back and trying to rip your head off. Practice, you don't get real live football because you're not allowed to touch the quarterback. And you can see that there were several dropbacks where they went past that 2 to 2.5 second mark, which is really the metric in terms of we're trying to get the ball out under 2.5 seconds consistently. But on these deep routes that take a long time to develop, you need the blockers to sustain and you need the quarterback to feel where the pressure is and is not. And that was a main focus that they had for Daniel early on. And what we saw early on in the game was your absolute worst nightmare. He threw 2 interceptions. And he should have thrown a third on that first play of the game where Derek Stingley jumped the route to Malik Neighbors. It really was kind of a roll your eyes moment where that first pass was not an interception because Stingley dropped the ball. It wasn't because Daniel put the ball where he was supposed to. You could blame Malik Neighbors on the route as well, but Phil Simms tried to do that plenty. He tried to help him out as much as he could on the broadcast. But it started off with that bad decision where he was, being rushed into his own end zone, backed up in his own territory. He did not get the ball out when he should have to Theo Johnson. That's a play that needs to be out right away, and he hesitated. And then he threw a ball that he never should have thrown and ended up in 6 points for Houston. And it kind of, if you hate Daniel Jones, you kind of laughed about it and said, here we go again. That's what we saw. And, I look forward to how does he respond to a situation like that? I'm okay with a bad turnover. Do I want to see that early on in the game? Absolutely not. Those are the kind of plays that lose games in the regular season. But how did he respond? And he came back. He didn't look too jumpy in the pocket after, but he did throw another interception on a throw where Jalen Hylett did have his step on Derek Stingley. So now we're looking about consecutive turnovers. The pass rush was not the issue, so we can't create that excuse for him. He's had more excuses than any quarterback in recent memory from any franchise I've ever seen. That it was not the offensive line's fault. It was not the receiver's fault. This was on DJ. So from that point on, no matter what he did from that point, you were going to have a dark cloud over the performance. Did he bounce back and show some positives? Absolutely. He threw an absolute dime to Darius Slayton. But this is the problem that I have personally with Daniel Jones, especially with the contract that he's now being paid, is that the only consistent thing about his game is that he's inconsistent. And we will see the flashes. It's enough to get you excited. It's enough for an owner to speak highly of you in the offseason. It's enough for beat reporters to write and say good things about him during training camp. But when it comes on a play-to-play, drive-to-drive, game-to-game basis, this is what we've gotten used to with him, is that we know he can do it, but he doesn't prove to do it over and over again. And that's what's maddening about this situation.
One question I just want to ask real quick on that thought. Some people will chalk it up to rustiness. Would you say any of this could be chalked up to rustiness, or is this just too indicative of past performance?
Well, that decision, especially the first interception, that's not rustiness. That's a decision you don't want to see, Michael Penix make as a rookie. You're 60 years in the NFL. That is an automatic. As I saw him getting taken to the ground, and as he was about to throw the ball, you look up and you're like, not again. You cannot make that kind of mistake. I don't care if you're rusty or not. I can understand rust with ball placement. I can understand rust with footwork and responding to pressure, but not decision-making. And Daniel Jones, the biggest weakness I had out of him coming out of Duke in 2019, and what I still see now, he doesn't, as smart as he may be, he does not quickly process information from the pocket. And that was a quick decision he had to make, and he failed.
There were 3 points I just wanted to make on this. When I was watching the game live, I had the Giants feed on, and then I rewatched the game. It was the Houston feed, so I heard the commentary from both sides. But when the play happened, the interception for the touchdown happened live, it was almost slow motion to me. He double clutched, and at first I thought, oh God, he's going to throw it. And then my initial reaction was in a split second was, oh, thank God he didn't throw it. And then they're like, oh no, what is he doing? He did throw it. So to me, it was almost like a car wreck when you're in a car wreck and it's in slow motion. It was like he didn't really just do that. And then second of all, because I saw the two feeds, after Wan'Dale Robinson had a nice reception over the middle, the Houston commentators were saying, man, the Giants really have some weapons here, but they just got to get more consistency out of their quarterback. So even so, I bring that up because fans who aren't too tied to this team or commentators see it. They see that the Giants are starting to get a line. They're starting to have these weapons, but they see the issues at quarterback. And I don't think it's gang piling right now on Daniel Jones. They see the issues. When you make those kinds of plays, I think that plays into the narrative that there's a problem at quarterback. And then the last thing I'll just throw out there, and then I'll shut up, is I think had the Giants drafted a quarterback in the first round, Jones would still be on the roster. But if they had drafted a quarterback in the first round, this is the week we would have started seeing that guy maybe getting some first team reps off of this game. Because the coaches can't be happy with that. As Cy just said, that a 6-year veteran shouldn't make that mistake. And I think they would. I think they've got to be right now going, oh my God. So that's all I would say about that.
Eric, the barometer for quality quarterback play in the NFL has risen over the past, let's say, decade. I'm not going to say it's easier to play quarterback than it used to be, but with the rule changes and the amount of athletes that are coming in, the amount of information that's out there, I do question why some people still believe in Daniel Jones from the perspective of, do you watch the league enough? I mean, even just watching CJ Stroud and how he responded to some pressure when he was backed up in his own end zone. There's just subtle footwork, subtle release, ball placement that is just, and the guy's a second-year pro. And you expect to see that as a second-year pro. It should not even be a thought as a sixth-year guy that has been locked up to a long-term deal. What we saw last year, in my opinion, might be the most damning thing to Daniel Jones. That was a bad offensive situation last year. Nobody can argue against that. But the Giants averaged 3.9 yards per play when Jones was on the field. DeVito, 4.3. Tyrod Taylor, 5.2. Those guys dealt with the same situations as Daniel Jones, but they produced more. And these are backups. These are journeyman backups / undrafted free agents. And there seems to be a line, and I know, Eric, you talk about this on the forum a lot, where you've never seen two sides that are just such opposite extremes of each other that just constantly want to go at it with each other. Is he the worst quarterback in the NFL? He's absolutely not. But is he capable of being even a top half of the league quarterback? Right now, I don't see it. And this is why the Giants had the opportunity to take a quarterback at 6 overall and JJ McCarthy. And I know we can't really watch him play this year because of his knee injury, but this was a decision that is just going to kick the can down the road for how many years in a row now. And you don't want to overreact to week 1 of preseason. I should say week 2 of preseason for the team, but week 1 for Daniel Jones. But this is where I disagree with that notion. This is not a 1 week overreaction. It's not a one throw overreaction. It's the sum of what we've seen for such a long time now, that Daniel Jones is not elevating the level of play of the players around him. That, to me, is what a real quarterback does in the NFL.
Yeah, the question I was going to ask you too. So on the first series, we have the first pass could have been intercepted. The Houston announcers threw a lot of the blame, not just on Jones, but they actually threw a lot on Neighbors too, which I thought was interesting because they really roasted Jones later.
Yeah.
The third down play, long pass to Neighbors was almost completed. That changes the complexity of the game if he does make it. It's a tough catch, but from Neighbors, you're kind of expecting, and almost any of the other receivers, I guess you would expect, he got their hand on the ball.
Yep.
Would that have changed at all of the narrative? Like if he makes that play, maybe we don't see some of those other things, or is that just kind of like, well, we just keep holding on to the glimmer of hope when you look at that?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the latter on that. I think that is what the Daniel Jones apologist is constantly clinging on to, that if this happened, that would have happened. If that happened, this may have happened. Then, you know what? You're right. That would have changed the trajectory of the game. But guess what? It didn't happen. Does the trajectory of the game finish? Is it different if Daniel Jones gets the ball out on time on that first interception to Theo Johnson, who was open when he hit the back of his backdrop off the play fake. If he put the ball out 3 yards further to Jalen Hyatt, are we looking at a touchdown there? And that is what's maddening about Jones, is he's right there on so many different occasions. He is truly one of the best scrambling quarterbacks in the NFL. Only Justin Fields and Josh Allen have been better at creating production off of scrambling. He's tougher than nails. That's what I love about him. I mean, take my evaluation out of it. I love how tough this kid plays. That means a lot to me, especially in this era of football. But we're constantly saying he's just right there. What if this happened? What if that happened? The more you find yourself talking about that in evaluation, the more it seems like you're trying to fight off the actual truth.
That's a damning statement right there, actually. And the one other question, Eric and I have talked about this a couple of times. We don't always agree on things, but this particular one of the biggest problems I see with Jones, beyond the stuff we talked about, is even on the things that work. Crossing patterns, some other things, the passes tend to be just enough off that the receiver has to change the direction of his body, reach back, turn around a little bit, which takes a play that might have been 15 yards and brings it to 7, or would have been a first down and it comes up a little short. Those things, I've not seen those things improve since day one.
His last pass of the game to Eric Gray, third and 4, 3rd and 5 on that play where it was near the end zone, and he threw it behind Gray. If he put it where he was supposed to put it, that's an automatic first down. We're probably getting another touchdown for the Giants. So if this was a regular season game and take out all the turnovers that the second string offense put out there, in addition, you're talking about a game-changing miss that does not show up on a traditional box score. It just looks like an incompletion or a pass that did not convert to the first down. Those are the plays. I mean, that's why I'm a huge Brock Purdy fan, and everyone says, oh, it's the system. And yes, it is part of the system. So is Patrick Mahomes' success. It's part of Andy Reid's system, but he puts the ball where it's supposed to be. And that's why San Francisco is always among the league leaders, if not at the top, in yards after catch. You hear quarterbacks say this all the time. Yards after catch are not just a receiver stat. It is a scheme stat, but it's also a ball placement stat. Do these guys go right into their break post-catch if the ball's put where it's, or do they need to adjust and need to reach up, reach down? In a game of inches, that matters a lot. And that's where Daniel Jones is also. Now, I could chalk that up to some rust, and I won't kill him for that. But again, this is an issue that we've seen for years, not months.
Right. And I would say this too is this may be one of the best games I've seen in terms of pass protection that Daniel Jones has had. Now, I know Houston was missing some key defensive players in this game. We were without John Runyon as well too, but he had a good pocket for most of the game, and there were some throws he could have even waited another second or so because he had such great protection. So I don't know, again, if this has been because he's taken such a beating over the years and his internal clock is off, or the coaches simply just want him to get the ball out quickly. But I don't think we can blame the pass protection in this game either, too, because I rewatched it, and this may have been the cleanest pocket consistently throughout the first half that he's ever had in his career.
Yeah, I agree with you, Eric. The offensive line, I mean, we could probably talk about Daniel Jones and the struggles at quarterback and make this an hour-long cry fest. But at some point, I know we're going to shift the conversation to another part of the team and even some positives, because there were a lot of positives that I took out of this game. And the offensive line is at the top of the list. I mean, what happened with this offensive line in terms of pressures and sacks last year and team sack differential, if you want to get a little deeper on the numbers, it was historically bad. One of the worst we've ever seen in the history of the game. So you can only go up from what they did last season. And we saw exactly that. I don't care who was it against, because part of the issues last year were communication based. These guys were missing assignments. Guys were coming untouched from the middle of the defensive line. That is one of the biggest changes I've seen over 2 games now, is that this offensive line as a whole seems a lot more cohesive.
So since we're switching, let's switch subjects. Let's go to the offensive line.
Yeah.
JMS missed a bunch of times, but did come back and actually played in this game. And Eric pointed out that he seemed to be on somewhat of a pitch count. I think he played 3 series there, and we were missing Runyon. So we talked about this. Eric's big point last week when we talked was the fact that we still haven't seen the first team offensive line. Still really hasn't played together at all. But overall, what do you see when you look at the offensive line now versus last year? And kind of, is it all coaching, or is it a combination of a new coach and some of the players we brought in?
Yeah, the latter. Definitely a combination of probably they really did. It looks like they at least hit a couple doubles, if you will, in free agency with Illuminor, who looked outstanding at right tackle from a technique perspective, body control perspective, hand control, really latching onto his man. And then the bodies that they have, not even including the top one in Runyon, they just look like they know what to do much better than, like, I watched that offensive line tape last year. It was hard. It literally was hard to watch last year with the amount of guys that just didn't seem to know what to do, where to go, and how to communicate with each other. And then you throw in the fact that a lot of them were just not good players. But these guys seem like they're a lot more stout, a lot more communicating up front, and they understand where the pressure might be coming from. And then you throw in the actual athletic skill set that they are redirecting a lot better. One issue I do have with John Michael Schmitz is he did seem like he started to chase a little bit in pass protection, crossing his feet, falling off balance. He only played 14 snaps, so it's kind of almost an incomplete grade, but not to the point where you should be alarmed. You still feel confident enough with him at center, but the guards have been, in my opinion, the biggest issues on this offensive line over the past few years when looking at it from a bird's eye perspective. They're just a revolving door of players, guys that just did not, guys were getting hurt, guys were not playing up to expectation. They haven't been able to develop young players in there. And it seems like Van Roten, eventually Runyon, even Stinney played a pretty good game yesterday, that you have to at least feel a little bit better in terms of what they're going to be protecting that offensive quarterback with.
Well, that's what I thought is kind of a good thing with this line right now, too, is Runyon doesn't play, but Stinney comes in. And Stinney did well, I thought, for a backup. So if you have somebody like that who can, that's what the Giants have missed in recent years, is a veteran or even a young player who can just come in to do a competent job. And I think that has a domino effect on, again, the center with Schmitz was last year. And you've repeatedly said this on a number of podcasts and game reviews that he had his issues last year. But I also think he was also hurt by the fact that he had 2 terrible guards next to him as well, too.
Yeah.
And I thought yesterday, and again, I'm not as good as you in grading offensive line. I thought he did okay. I know what you're talking about with the chasing. I saw a little bit of that. I also saw a little bit of he was getting to the second level, but he wasn't quite getting there yet. In other words, I saw the movement skills, but he's got to engage a little bit better on the second level. But I just think having the 2 guards next to him is going to help his game as well, too. And when Runyon's not in there, we have a Stinney now.
That's a good point. That's a great point for a young player like Schmitz.
With Schmitz, could some of that be chalked up to just getting his feet back under him after being out for quite a while?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's look on the offensive line. It's, I didn't have the highest grade on Schmitz coming out, but I do think he's the least of the concern right now up there. I mean, had to figure out what's going on with Evan Neal. You hope that these guys stay healthy. If Andrew Thomas were to go down again, what's the plan there? Because that entire thing, operation fell apart. I mean, I still to this day, even yet, including a game like yesterday, appreciate how good Andrew Thomas is. I mean, this guy is, I've watched a lot. I pretty much watch every single left tackle, especially the top ones, because that helps me gauge what to look for in the scouting process. And Andrew Thomas, I don't think there's a left tackle better than him in the NFL right now.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. I'm not going to say he's better than Trent Williams, but you tell me right now who am I taking, Andrew Thomas or Trent Williams for one game to save my life? I don't know who I'm taking it. He's in that tier. So it's a great thing that the Giants have him locked up long-term. And if you watch some of the tape, what he does, body control, speed, quickness, hand power, it looks easy for him too. And so if he can stay healthy, that operation should remain at least average.
Can I throw one name out there too? And you might say I'm dead wrong on this one, so feel free to. I saw, from my perspective, a somewhat noticeable improvement from game 1 to game 2 in Josh Azudu playing left tackle. I thought, again, not there yet, but I just saw improvement. So I didn't see a play where in the first preseason game it seemed like at times he was holding on for dear life, no pun intended, but it was a little shaky out there. I thought in this game his setup was a lot better. That was my general impression.
I just got done grading the offensive line this morning for the review, Eric, and he was leaps and bounds more comfortable than what we saw last week, which is exactly what you want to see from a young player that to me is still more guard than tackle, but he might be the backup left tackle by default because they don't have another option. I think everyone knows that he probably would be better off inside, and I still think that's where his long-term home will be, but you need a backup plan for left tackle, and it can't be what happened last year. So you're exactly right. He had a much better game than he did last week.
What are your thoughts on some of the other backup linemen, including Kubis, who we've talked about a number of times? You know, a guy coming from a smaller school, young guy, and he's really performed well so far.
Yeah, he's definitely doing everything he can to make this roster. It does seem like it's a little crowded inside. But watching the first 2 games, I take him and what he can turn into over what Marcus McKeithen is showing right now. I think that ship might have sailed, but it's a guy that you would want to keep on the practice squad at least. I like what we saw out of Austin Schlottman. I thought he played pretty well in backup duty. He played the most of the snaps, him and Jimmy Morrissey, because Schmitz only played 14 snaps. Matt Nelson and Evan Neal, hopefully we see on the field. Those guys, just based on what has happened to the Giants offensive line in recent years, are going to factor in at some point. You can't assume everyone's going to stay healthy all year. And, you know, Evan Neal is probably a discussion for another day. I still think we should wait to see him in live action. But Matt Nelson and Joshua Miles are 2 guys that I think would fit in with previous Giants offensive lines, meaning it's not good enough. And I don't know if those are the long-term answers for backup tackles. Evan Neal I still think, even if he's not starting, I think he's one of the most important players on this team because he's going to be counted on at some point. And I hope that we see a different version of what we've seen over the past 2 years.
And the only thing I'll throw out there is your earlier comment that's a combination of the talent and the coaching. And I see the young players that have limitations playing better as a unit right now, even with the second and third team offensive lines. We've gone through preseasons before where the Giants are unwatchable on offense. And I know they didn't score a lot of points, but it wasn't really the offensive line in my book. I think that the coaching level, I hate to throw Bobby Johnson under the bus because he's still a pro coach, but I think the difference is so noticeable now in the coaching level because the players seem to be getting better. Like I just mentioned Josh Azudu, but even the Mayfields and the Miles back, they're not, I don't know if they're pro players, but they just seem to be at least performing. And I think the coaching has had a big difference on this team.
Yeah, I've had multiple people that have worked in the NFL tell me that offensive line coaches are the most important position coaches in the NFL. And it's the biggest gap between good and bad, good and medium, like average. The top offensive line coaches, the guys that do it really well, the margin between them and your general average offensive line coach are enormous. And I can see that. And we've seen a few players, the Giants have missed on offensive line coaches a few guys in a row. We've seen guys leave here and play at a much higher level. Kevin Zeitler is one of them. Will Hernandez, guys that once they left, they never were great, but they were better than what they were here. And I think there's a lot of truth behind that, Eric, that the coaching is making a difference to this point. We still need to see them against a real formidable defensive front. Houston, I mean, not to beat that dead horse, but Daniel Jones, he started to turn it around, but you have to keep in mind that he attacked Mike Ford, the number 5 or number 6 corner on Houston, with Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, like just over and over was thrown in his direction. And I look at some of these players that the Giants offensive line were beating up on. It's second, third, fourth stringers. So, it's progress, but let's not celebrate yet. We need to see this against a real front.
Yeah.
Right. Well, with that in mind, so I think we've got the offensive line. What are some of the other positives? Let's move to the skill positions. Let's kind of mix the tight ends and the receivers together and start with the tight ends. What are your thoughts there? Theo Johnson saw a little bit more action this week, and then kind of where the Giants are overall at the tight end position.
I mean, Theo Johnson is an easy guy to fall in love with. I mean, he just has a rare but prototype / dreamy combination of tools when it comes to height, weight, speed, leaping ability. And when he does things correctly, you can even hear it in Brian Daboll's voice, both in Hard Knocks and when they ask him about him in interviews, how excited they are about his long-term upside. With that said, the asterisks on there, rookie tight ends, it's very rare that you're going to see someone come in and make a significant impact. I mean, for every Sam Laporta from Detroit that comes in and blows the league up year one, you have 10 to 15 tight ends that need a year or two. So Theo Johnson to me is still, hey, let's look past this year in terms of expecting big things. Let's hope to see progress and maybe a couple of red zone touchdowns, which is where I think he could be a weapon in 2024. But that's going to have to be like, let's a wait and see situation. It looks like they're trying to get creative with Daniel Bellinger. He saw a lot of snaps coming out of the backfield last night. And I have always thought he's a much better blocker on the move. And I think that goes to show they probably think that as well. He's just not a very stout guy. He needs a running start, but he's athletic enough to make adjustments on the fly like that.
Yeah, I thought when I really try to focus on the tight ends in this game, and I agree with you completely that Bellinger seemed to be almost playing fullback for much of the game. Manhurts seems to be there, at least for much of this particular game. They used him a lot in line. And I saw them match him up on defensive linemen. And for the most part, I thought he did all right. And I thought Bellinger did all right, too. Which surprised me a little bit is, given his reputation coming out of Penn State, sort of as a so-so blocker. I thought there was one play where Theo Johnson gave up a negative run. They put him in motion, and he couldn't handle the guy, and there was a loss on the play. But I thought in this game, I thought he did better than I expected as a blocker. They had him in line as well quite a bit, and they put him in motion at times too. So I thought that was a positive development. So those saying, oh, geez, we didn't see a lot of Theo Johnson in this game catching the ball. They used him a lot, I thought, on the field in a blocking role, which I think gets to what you were saying. The development of a tight end is hard, and I'm glad that they're giving him that role as well too. Because if he's going to be the player we want him to be, he's got to block as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always thought that with tight ends, especially, you can evaluate how hard they try. You know, they call it want to, the desire to block, and he has that. And the guy's going to weigh 255, 260, 6'6", with power, speed, explosion. If he wants to be a good enough blocker, he will be. And so far, that's what we see, Eric. We see the effort, the second contact, the secondary contact. There's initial contact, but as a blocker, and then and then it all comes down to what you do with your feet and how you readjust your hands and replace your hands. He does all of that. You could tell that he's trying, that he wants to be a part of that. So as long as he stays healthy, everybody should feel optimistic about what Theo Johnson can be for this offense.
Do you think he was signed the day before this game? He comes into the game, and Jacob Johnson drops a pass, but on the very next play, they have him as lead blocker, and he crushed the defender in the hole.
Yeah.
You think Jacob Johnson has an outside chance to make this roster as maybe the fourth tight end / fullback, or do you think he's just a camp body at this point?
At this point, it's a camp body, but let's not overlook how big these practice squads are now. Like, I bet he lands somewhere there, because I think there's still a little indecision on what they should do at tight end. There's indecision on what they should do at wide receiver with how many bodies they should keep around. I mean, they're going to have to let one or two guys loose that some of us are going to have a realistic shot at this roster. And, you know, early on, I think they're going to err towards more like, hey, let's keep an extra body or two on that practice squad at tight end, because we still just don't know. I don't think they know what they're doing with Daniel Bellinger yet. He's not going anywhere. He'll be on the roster, but can they use him as a fullback? If they feel comfortable with him at fullback, I would think it's a lot less likely that we would see Jacob Johnson stick around.
Yeah, it's interesting too. So the other piece that we have is we have the strictly blocker and Manhurts.
Yeah.
But is he guaranteed to make it. I mean, Stoll is still there, who provides a tiny bit of receiving versus Manhurst's receiving, but neither is going to do much more than block. I mean, your thoughts on the makeup? Obviously, we talked about Bellinger. He's going to be there. It depends on his role. Then you've got Johnson, who's obviously going to be there. Is Manhurst kind of guaranteed the blocking role, or are they looking maybe elsewhere?
I mean, Eric might be able to answer that better, but from my perspective, it's going to come down to who can offer more on special teams. And Manhurst, to me, seems like the guy that can offer a little bit more help there.
The only thing I'll throw out this is Manhurst is a big dude, and what stood out to me in this particular game, and it's just one game, is there were a number of plays where I tried to focus on the blocking, and I kept noticing number 85 at the end of the line on a defensive lineman. And if you can put a tight end on a defensive lineman, that's a big win for, I think, the offense. So this may be something where if he gets cut down thing, I'll look dead wrong on this. But I think he makes this team just because I think they want an inline blocker right now.
Yeah.
That's my feeling.
Yeah, I would lean that direction as well.
So then if we go outside, we talked about the receivers. We know Neighbors, but we still need to talk about him. So you've got Neighbors. Slayton made a bunch of plays, and he's always sort of had that connection with Jones. Those two seem to have a connection. You've got Wan'Dale Robinson and then Jalen Hyatt. So let's talk about those four, and let's start specifically with the last one. Start with Hyatt and where he's kind of at in his development, because we're still waiting for the big play ability to be realized on the field.
Yeah, and you almost had that brilliant catch near the corner of the end zone where his foot just barely slipped out of bounds, and that was something I really want to see with him, because we know the speed is there. We know he can get vertical. We know he can get over the top, and we know he tracks the ball well too. It's one thing to be fast, but he tracks the ball exceptionally well. I call it just like slow eyes, right? Like he really is a coordinated athlete when the ball is coming his way. My question with him coming out of Tennessee and after watching him last year, how well can he play through contact? Can he get off the jam at the point of attack? Can he get through contested situations and come away with the ball? And that is where I think Darius Slayton excels in comparison to Hyatt. You know, I think a lot of Giants fans want Hyatt to take that number 2 receiver spot from Darius Slayton, but until he proves he can play through contact a little bit better, and he's not a big guy, he's not a strong guy, that's going to be something that can limit him, and it might make a quarterback like Daniel Jones a little hesitant to really trust him in tight situations. Is that if he can't play through contact, it's much more likely a good corner, Derek Stingley, Trayvon Diggs, are going to fight through him to come away with the football.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I'm glad you said that too. Real quick, just back to the pass from Jones to Hyatt. I mean, he beat his man. He had the. If that ball's thrown to the back line or the pylon, that's his play. That's he's open. He should have that catch.
Yep, that's a touchdown right there. Now, hey, Stingley made a great play on the ball. I mean, let's not discount that kid. That is a very good corner. I know Sauce Gardner got off to the hotter start, but remember those guys came out in the same draft, and there was a lot of debate who was better, Sauce or Stingley, and Sauce got the win initially, but I'm still holding on to the fact that I think Stingley might end up being a better player in the NFL. So it was a great play by Stingley, and it wasn't a terrible throw by Jones. It just wasn't good enough. And I would have loved to have seen him put it out there another 2-3 yards, because that Hyatt would have had to extend for it. And if he came away with a couple plays like that from Tyrod Taylor, I remember, where when the ball gets out in front of him, he can kind of hit that turbo boost and kind of close on. And that's the sign of a true deep threat. And that was an opportunity for Jones to put it out in front of him and see what he can do with it.
Yeah, that's my problem. Don't underthrow Hyatt, overthrow.
Yeah,
right.
He'll catch. He'll catch up. He's got that extra gear. So that I thought that was a bad throw. I thought it was underthrown, and it was there was not enough air under it. I thought if he played that out in front of him, it was a touchdown. But like you said, Stingley's a good player. Houston's a good team. They have a lot.
They are.
We can mention a number of players before we get off if we want to sort of keep this balance too. But there were a couple players on Houston that really caught my eye too.
Yeah. I mean, also, I hate saying this, but 1st and 10 from the 33. I mean, that you just can't make a mistake like that. That's another one of those things. It's like a deeper dive. You can't make, if that's 3rd and 10 and you're down 4, fine, take that aggressive chance. But if you're going to take an aggressive chance, 1st and 10, and you're throwing to the fastest player on your team, put it out there. Like Eric said, put it out too far and say, hey, Hyatt couldn't get up to it. It's like trying to putt for a birdie and you leave it 2 feet short. Like you have to go for it at some point.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to stick on the Jones things too long, but there's times where I feel like his throws they're more mechanical than instinctual.
Yes,
and that was he was almost trying to be precision. I'm gonna get it right on the line, and it's like if you just throw it, the guy's fast, just throw it to him. I'd rather you do that than do what you did, because that's, I don't know, shades of Seattle last year when you
great point.
Yeah, but so let's look at the group, and I know we've talked about the top four, but hit on a couple of those guys, especially Neighbors. I want your impression of his play so far, and then maybe let's delve into Isaiah McKenzie, Hodgins, and kind of where we think the rest of that group's going to shake out.
Yeah, I mean, Neighbors, just other than that first, but he should have went up with both hands. It was a quick throw. I think it caught him off guard a little bit. And I think if you give him that opportunity 10 times, he catches it 8 times. So it's okay there. He made 2 spectacular grabs away from his body. It's one thing we didn't see a ton of out of LSU. We saw it enough to give him a high grade there, but we didn't see him have to adjust to the ball in the air a ton. Jaden Daniels was a very accurate passer when throwing his way. A lot of his damage in college was also done after the catch. So both the catches that he made away from his body, that one near the sideline, really high level catches from the perspective of the best receivers in the games do this. Davante Adams is the best. They get to the ball at the apex of their leap. And that is a timing, that is a coordination, that is a natural gift type where it's really hard to teach someone. And to see that he's already doing that is very encouraging. And this will be the most exciting wide receiver the Giants have had since Odell Beckham. And I've seen enough already through college and preseason that is the objective case. This is going to be a very exciting player. And the Giants have a credible number 1 threat at wide receiver.
And it wasn't just the hands and getting the ball at the apex. I was really impressed with the footwork to keep both feet in bounds on those catches too. Very
coordinated, just a natural athlete. And what I love about him that Beckham didn't quite have, he wasn't a slouch in this area, but he is a strong, thick dude, Neighbors. Like he plays through contact. He's going to break tackles. He is, he'll take hits and stay standing. Like there's a lot to be happy about with Malik Neighbors. So he is as advertised.
And then even just a tad bit more credit on that first one to the sidelines. That's another one of those passes that kind of wasn't where it needed. He actually had to turn back catching it, and he takes a shot to the face while making the catch.
It was a big hit.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, geez, don't get our guy killed. So we know what we got in Neighbors. What are your thoughts then, for real quick, Slayton, where he kind of stands with this team? And Eric knows, I've said this over and over again, if the Giants ultimately need to do something where they need to acquire, he's one of the tradable assets that we have, because you do have other receivers. If we needed something, he might be a guy that could be in play for another team. But your thoughts on him, and then Wan'Dale, which we've only seen a little bit so far in training camp, which is fine because he's a small guy. You don't want to get him beat up. But thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, I mean, Wan'Dale, I'll start off with him. I loved him coming out of college. I remember being interviewed by someone, I think he's one of our BBI guys, Dave Del Cole, but he asked me, like, just give me like some of your favorite players, not best draft highest graded players, just some of the guys that you really are confident are going to be good based on where they get drafted. And Robinson was on that list. To me, though, he's always going to be, and this is not a diss at him, he's going to be a gadget guy. He's not going to be someone that you're relying on week in, week out. He's not going to be your number 1 or even your number 2. But the fact that he can be a number 3, he's going to create a lot on his own. And I think that's what the Giants need more and more of, especially if Daniel Jones is proving that he cannot make these big time throws on a consistent basis. You're going to have to find different ways to manufacture offensive production. And Wan'Dale Robinson is probably the best, maybe with Neighbors in town, the second best player on this team when it comes to creating on his own, with how shifty, how quick, how explosive you can get out of the gate. Darius Slayton, to me, kid I loved coming out of Auburn. I loved what he did his rookie year. It got you really excited. Then the drops become an issue. The contested situations become an issue. But now I actually think, to a point where he's underappreciated. This guy, I think he's just going to be a very solid, maybe a hair under Amani Toomer type, where he's just going to get you 700-800 yards a year. He's never going to be the guy, but he can be a guy, 5 to 6 weeks a year. And I agree, if the Giants are out of it, there will be a market for him because he's not expensive.
And then real quick then, so the other group we mentioned, you've got the Isaiah McKenzie, which seems like he's kind of cementing. with Gunner's injury, he could be the return guy. He can play slot. Your thoughts on Hodgins, Boykin, that kind of group, and then is it possible that maybe the Giants after cut down might look to find somebody else, because none of those guys really. Boykin stands out in specials, but Hodgins hasn't stood out in a while.
Yeah, I mean, we love what Hodgins did in 2022. That seems like such a long time ago, right? when the Giants were winning a playoff game in Minnesota. Him and Allen Robinson to me are very similar players. Hodgins has a little bit more youth on his side, but Robinson has a little bit more, credibility from a career production perspective. And I still think he has enough speed and quickness in his game to get separation underneath. But the Giants do need a big body at wide receiver. I think it's important to have what Daniel Jeremiah says is like your basketball team at wide receiver. You need that big power forward type. But I don't want to look past Miles Boykin, because I think we're going to see this more and more this season with the kickoff changes, how vital that whole new way of kickoffs is going to matter a lot. You can already start to see teams like Miami and Los Angeles Rams. They're even finding different ways to kick the ball off. I mean, there's some teams that might put a safety at kickoff if they can get it into that zone every time for the extra tackler. I bring that up just because I don't think we completely know how much this is going to change the game. And I believe it's going to be a huge deal. And you're going to have Miles Boykin truly is a difference maker as a gunner on special teams. And he can do some things as a receiver. He's had some success.
I think Cy froze there for a minute.
Yeah, froze a second.
Yeah, we'll hopefully catch back on there. But yeah, so I know you and I have talked. We'll wait, see Cy should be able to get back there in a sec. Boykin to me still is the gunner wise, the coverage wise, he stands out. I mean, he stands out as far as I'm concerned on his ability to get down and make the play. He always seemed to be around the ball, at least in the Detroit game. I didn't really pay attention to him as much in this game. I think the Giants were trying a bunch of other guys, but your thoughts on that, with Boykin.
Yeah, I think he's going to make the team. I just think his value on special teams is so great. Again, I could be dead wrong about this, but I think that he has a role. I also I'm going to keep pushing back on you trying to trade Slate, and I think I get what you're saying, and I think if they do trade somebody, you're completely correct. He has that value given his contract, given his pecking order and so forth. But I think he showed his value still in the game against Houston. And so I think those are the leads. And the big question is, do they keep 6 or 7? I'm leaning towards 6, not the 7. Just so our viewers know, we're waiting for Cy to jump back on technical difficulties. So you got boring old Eric talking right now. So, but I think I the only thing I'll throw out there too is I think Hodgins is regressing a little bit right now. I wasn't impressed with his game yesterday. I think if he really wanted to make a push, he's not making it. I kind of feel bad because I wanted to see more from him. I thought he had a future here based on 2022, and I'm just not seeing it. So I think he's going to have a heck of a final game against the Jets if he's going to make the squad. That's where I'm at right now. It's really the top 4, and I'm seeing 2 special teams players at that position.
Well, too, and with Hodgins, I mean, again, this is a guy that he wasn't highly sought after coming out. He was on the Bills, got cut. I mean, the Giants picked him off waivers. He just happened to join a very poorly put together group and managed to stand out. But that might have also been, I don't want to steal the word apex as we were just using a little while ago, but that might have been the pinnacle portion of his career. That might have been his best play. And so we say he's regressing, but in reality, the talent around him is now way better. I mean, this is a guy now who's really battling to even just make the team, because everybody else on that team is significantly, at least even if not better. And a lot of them, Robinson, McKenzie, Boykin, they've been in the league longer and they have had experience playing in the league. So he's kind of got an uphill battle. And if you're not going to stand out in specials, which he hasn't really stood out, and you're not really taking that big guy role, taking it over, he's going to kind of fall by the wayside, I think.
Yeah, and I guess what I was expecting was him. He still was a young player. I just thought he would improve and again, not be a starter, but I thought he would be pushing for a spot. So when you're playing against second and third teamers, I would have expected a guy like him to be noticeable, and he wasn't noticeable. So again, I think we're going to see some players be placed on the practice squad, and he might be one of them. I think he's a player you cut. He's probably not going to go to another team. Maybe I haven't tracked all the wide receivers around the league, and maybe there's some team that's out there that's desperate, but I think he's a guy you can cut and put on the practice squad.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I mean, that's, and and he's also one of those guys that if you do cut him and he does not, come back, it is what it is. Like, it's not tanking your team if that occurs.
Right. And I'm going to try to email Cy here to make sure he can get back on. So if people are wondering what I'm doing, but I think the other thing too, just to finish up with the offense is just overall, I like the trajectory of the offense. We didn't really get into the running backs. Maybe when Cy gets back on, we can finish up with the running backs. But I thought the running backs, Singletary, and I thought we had another. Again, there weren't a lot of touches, but I thought we saw another good game from Gray, both catching and running the football. He had their best run. I thought, I looked at the stats, and I agree with other people that, man, I thought Singletary ran better than his stats, but there were a couple of runs the Giants had in the game where he got nailed in the backfield, and people said, well, the offensive line. There were about, I want to say 4 plays that at least I wrote down where the play design left a free runner get to either the quarterback, or it let the free runner get to the running backs. And so you had a couple of runs where the back, again, it wasn't an offensive line breakdown, it wasn't a tight end breakdown, but for some reason they left the backside guy, or somebody just shot the gap, and it wasn't a physical breakdown, it was more. So I thought those skewed the running back stats a little bit, where, so instead of, when you looked at it, was 10 carries for 20 yards, and you're like, wait, he ran better for that. But there were a couple of those -5 yard plays.
Right.
And I went back, well, who screwed up? And I was like, well, no one really screwed up. The play call was weird. It was like, why didn't they block that guy? So
there was, and we do have Cy is back with us. One play real quick though, on one of the, I think it was an inside handoff, and I want to say it was to Singletary, when he and Jones came together. Jones limped for a second, and I'm like, is that the same knee? But it was the other leg. And he literally, after the run where I think he came up just short on the run, so they had to go on third. He still was limping a little bit. And I'm like, oh dear God, if you care in the preseason, this is dumb. So we were talking running back size. So your thoughts on the Giants with the backfield, so we can, we'll get through that and we can switch to the defense.
Yeah, sorry about that. We have a little storm here right now, and everything just went dark for a sec. So, but yeah, I'm back now. Running backs, I loved what I saw out of Singletary from the decisiveness perspective. He really is one thing Brian Daboll loves to do with his running backs, and I remember him getting on Saquon early on when they started together 2 years ago, was to hit the hole harder. And that's exactly what Singletary does. He gets in there, and good blocking obviously helps, but I like what I saw. 10 carries, 20 yards aren't going to impress you, but I think as I came in, Eric was talking about the big loss. I think there was a 5-yard loss on a miscommunication.
Yeah, I think there were 2.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But I'll tell you what, I'm biased. Eric knows how I feel about Eric Gray. I think this guy is going to be a factor. What I like about him is he's kind of a no-nonsense runner. He doesn't have a lot of shake and wiggle to his game. He's not the most explosive big play back, but he constantly falls forward, and he will break a few tackles. He's got an incredibly strong lower body. I don't know if you could always see it from the broadcast angle, but he has Saquon caliber thighs and calves. It's just a really strong, balanced runner. And the more I see him carry the ball in these live game action situations, the more I see that we still don't know what we have in him. I think he's still kind of getting comfortable to the NFL speed and acclimating. So I feel good that the Giants backfield in combination, we won't see a huge drop off compared to what Saquon produced by himself. And you're not hedging everything on one guy.
I thought Gray's breakout game last week was a big boost to his confidence.
Yeah.
So I was very curious to see how he played this week, and he didn't have a lot of touches, but he just seems to be more confident now, and he's running with authority. He had the best run of the game, and I'm loving his hands out of the backfield right now.
Yeah.
Some of the catches he's making aren't easy catches, and so I think the combination of what he brings to the passing game, and I'm seeing a decisiveness to his running game right now. He's winning me over. I know you've been on the bandwagon for a while, and I thought the fans last year were too harsh on him because he was put in a role that he wasn't familiar with, which is returner.
Yeah.
But I like our running backs right now, and we missed out on Tracy. And the other thing I want to throw out there too, Si, before I forget, because I wanted to bring this up to you. It looks like we hit on all of our draft picks. I know it's real early.
Yeah.
But I even, and we'll get this and get to the defense. I'm even liking our 6th round pick at this point. So I thought we had a really good draft, and we're starting to see some of the other draft picks now from previous years starting to have an impact.
Yeah, I strongly trust this new front office. And when you really truly trust a front office, you know that there are going to be misses here and there with contracts, free agents, a couple draft picks, but the more time that these guys are in these seats, the more likely you're going to have drafts where it produces 4, 5, 6, 7 positive grades, right? You want a specific level of play from every round in which you draft a player. And it looks like the Giants are hitting that minimum and maybe even getting even more out of them. It's way too early to really strongly say something about it. Yeah. Evan Neal holds a pretty big key to the bus, but even if he does not work out, you can't label this a bad front office when it comes to drafting, because nobody gets it right all the time. There's not a front office in football that gets all these early picks right.
Yeah, and quite frankly, with Evan Neal, that's a tough one because he was highly ranked. It's not like, it's not like the Giants back in the day taking Thomas Lewis, wide receiver, in the 1st round, and Mel Kiper had him as the 26th or 22nd best wide receiver, not even best player, and the Giants took him in the 1st round. This is a guy that was expected to go pretty high.
Good point.
And you're counting on it. You just don't always know. So yeah. I'm with you there. So one thing real quick, there's been, and Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, is it Dan Duggan that's hinting that maybe the Giants, or is it Stapleton, that maybe they're hiding Miller a little bit, that they might be able to not showcase him so they could get him to the practice squad? And then my thought is, if that's true, do we go with the group with maybe a fullback, or are they going to look, as I've mentioned before, maybe scour the wire to get a veteran back? Because this team is really young all over the board.
Yeah, I think it was Duggan, and I want to hear Si's comments on this. The only thing I will say is that sometimes fan bases sometimes get too enamored with a player because he's ours. He's on our team, and I like what I see from Miller because he looks more physical than I anticipated him being at his size. So right now I'm leaning towards, geez, I don't want to cut him because I really like him, but again, is that because I'm wearing, blue colored glasses and I don't want to lose the guy? So they may be trying to hide him, but I see the speed to his game and some toughness, but he's a very small player too. So maybe Cy can comment on, he may have completely different thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean the overall the average size of an NFL running back has gone down a little bit in recent years because the game is favoring speed and space. But there is still a line that most teams won't go past, and he's straddling that line right now. But it'd be one thing if he wasn't a tough dude. He really ran behind his pads last week when we saw him play. Hiding, stashing, I don't know how that might be more of a talking point than realistic. I mean, these scouting staffs in the NFL, they know about Dante Miller, and they have now a game of tape on him from preseason. So I don't know if hiding him is really the strategy or the actual play from the Giants front office. But I wouldn't stress too much about who the number 4 back is on this team. You're going to find running backs no matter what after cut day. So if they did lose him, it's not the end of any. That's very far down the list of things I'd be stressing out about.
And the only thing I'll throw out there too, Si, is I think the joint practices that are now a league-wide phenomenon makes it harder to hide players too. You say it's a talking point anyways, but when Detroit and the Jets get a firsthand look at our players and we get a firsthand look at their players in practices, I think the scouts are out there watching everybody and saying,
Yeah,
hey,
absolutely.
hey, this guy on Detroit can help us, or this guy on the Jets can help us. And the same thing goes
Absolutely.
the other direction.
Right.
Yeah, I'm friends with a pro personnel scout on an AFC team, and they know about Dante Miller. Like there's no hiding him, especially, and that's a great point. The joint practices, I wasn't even thinking about that, and adding that into the equation now. I mean, there are no more secrets in this regard. You can get away with some draft related secrets that some teams have in terms of who they're scouting and who they're actually looking at, but the NFL, it's really out in the open now.
So we can add hiding and stashing to the NFL myths, which includes rising up the draft board 2 days before the draft is happening. Yeah. So
it gets the clicks though. It gets the clicks.
Doesn't it, right? So let's switch. Let's go to the other side of the ball, because I mean, I don't want to take up your entire morning here. Let's jump right in. Let's start with the defensive line, kind of what we saw in the game. And I know Eric's going to want to hear about this because he and I were kind of different opinion. I've come around. I see it differently now. Let's talk about the group, and then talk about Chapman in particular and what he brings to the table, because he is a different dude than the rest of the guys they have.
Yeah, Chapman. I mean, we could start off there. I'm looking at my my draft notes on him. 5'11", 278, 4'8", 40, 31-inch vertical. I mean, these are numbers that are good, but they're not great. Like when he chased down JJ Taylor, a running back I actually really like, he came out of Arizona, was with New England initially. That was one of the most impressive plays of the game from a speed perspective, but also just from a sheer effort hustle. Like that's not overblown. Those are the plays that can get a guy on a roster. Now, what does he do once he's actually on the roster? We'll see. But because of last week, and I kind of diminished the likelihood of him being on this roster, and then the Giants traded Jordan Phillips. And I said, okay, that I don't think that alone gets him on the roster, but that does open a door that for a skill set like this, which is really unique, coming from a Bowen defensive system that has favored shorter, undersized defensive tackles in the past, it started kind of waking me up to the fact that maybe I'm overlooking this kid. And the scout in me says 5'11", 278. I'm like, it doesn't happen in the NFL. But you look at some of his other dimensions, he's got great length. And now you're talking about a really rare combination of speed, power, pop, quickness, and then a highlight play like that. In addition to, he got held by Shaq Mason, number 69, right guard, a really good guard that if he had not get held, he probably would have had a sack on CJ Stroud. I mean, there's multiple things, and this is what a young kid like this needs to do. You need to find a way to impact the game on multiple different angles, and that's what he's doing. And I'm here for it, man. Like I want this guy to make the roster, and I think that I was banging on the door for Mekhi Wingo to be the Giants' 6th-round pick last spring, because I really felt like they needed an interior pass rush force that can back up a couple of the guys they have, and it looks like they might have found them in Chapman.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Cy said when he talks about length. Andre Patterson was talking the other day, and he's saying he's short, but he's got long arms, and he's a big, well put to do. And he said, this really stood out to me. And I don't know if this is true, because again, remember Dexter Lawrence is on his team. He said he's the strongest guy on the team. If Chapman's the strongest guy on the team with long arms, and he's got and Andre Patterson talked about this too. You don't have to worry about leverage issues with him. He's lower than everybody else he's facing. I think it's two things were funny for me in the game. One, he played with the first unit, and when he lined up next to Dexter Lawrence, it was really funny. It was just like Dexter Lawrence is this mammoth man, and right next to him is this little guy next to him, and the size differential between the two just really stood out to me. But there was one play later on in the game when the first teamers were out. Chapman played a lot. He not only played with the first team, but he played late into the game at times, and I think into the third quarter. They lined him up over the center at nose, and the center had fits with him. It was like he was like only just like an inch from him, and he already was under his pads, and it was. I don't think NFL players are used to having somebody that short line up against them. So I almost think it's almost like a change up. It's tough for them to handle him because they don't have anybody like that they're practicing against on their own team. So when they face him, it's almost like a whirling dervish. So we may, again, a year from now, he may not even be on the team. This may have been, we may forget about him. I don't know. It's just kind of fun in that play where he chased them down, just to see the Giants. I've never seen a team give up and I know they called it back as he stood out, but I've never seen any team sideline cheer so much for giving up a 40-yard run.
Yeah,
they were all over there. The entire Giants team was like slapping them on the back, and they just given up a 40-yard run. It was really funny.
Yeah, Bruce Feldman, the writer for The Athletic, every year comes out with what he calls the freak list. It's a must read if you're into scouting at all and want to. And it really is a list of the biggest freaks in college football. And some of it's speed, some of it's size, some of it's combination. And Chapman was on that list last year from SMU. He's number 58 on the list. And they do a little write-up on why this guy's on the freak list. And he put up 42 reps at 225 pounds, which is like a John Randall type number. And that's the name that some people want to bring up when they talk about him. I don't think we should go in that direction yet, but they also talk about his vertical. And one thing I loved about Aaron Donald coming out of college, I thought he was one of the top 6 players in the draft, and I wanted the Giants to draft him over Odell Beckham, was the fact that there was a uniqueness to his build because he was short, but he had 33-inch arms. And that, if you know how to use properly when it comes to leverage and pad level, is an enormous advantage. And then you throw in the athletic ability. So there's a reason to be optimistic about this kid. We've seen this recently with Kansas City. They have a defensive tackle named Tershawn Wharton, 6'1", 280. He went to Missouri S&T. I don't know if anyone really knows where that program is or what they are. We had him at the Shrine Bowl when I was working on that Shrine Bowl staff. And it's almost like exactly as Eric put it, the blockers, they didn't know what to do. He was too quick, but he was also too small to really get a firm grip on. And if you know how to leverage that, no pun intended, then it's something that can be a weapon.
So with that, all right, so let's move off Chapman for a minute. We do have a group of guys. Lawrence, we don't even have to talk about Lawrence.
Yeah.
We know what he is and all this stuff. But we have a group of guys that are very similar. Now, Phillips left, we traded him, and he was already looking like he might be on the outside looking in overall. Kind of what do we have in that group, and who to you so far has kind of maybe stood out, and as far as like this guy could be the, if Roaches is not playing, who's going to be that guy? They said it was Ryder Anderson pulls his hamstring. So kind of what do we have there?
Tough spot, because Ryder Anderson was a unique player in that he could play inside and outside. And I don't know. I mean, Boogie Basham can be that as well. Majority of his snaps in the NFL have been on the outside. He has a little bit of an interior type body. But I do think this is an area where a lot of Giants fans feel very optimistic. I'm a little worried about the depth here. DJ Davidson and Jordan Riley, 2 late round draft picks in consecutive years, have shown enough to say like, hey, they could be the guy. They could be someone that can make a difference if someone were to go down. And between those two, I lean towards Davidson. I just think that he has a little bit better get off, a little bit more consistent pad level. Jordan Riley at his best, when everything is lined up, looks like a very, like someone that can shrink the pocket, great length, great push, but he's very inconsistent with his pad level and his get off, where DJ Davidson plays with a little bit more swag and a little bit more, like you could just see him making plays in the opposing backfield a little bit more often. And I saw that yesterday as well.
I will say this too. What really caught my eye, unless I missed it, Davidson played early and Riley didn't get in until late, which I thought was really, really telling. And then when Riley got in the game, and I've been encouraged by those flash plays that we've seen him in previous years, but I started expecting him to have a big game late. I didn't see it. So there were a couple players that I thought had an opportunity to make a statement yesterday, and Riley was one of them, and I don't think he did it. And I thought the fact that, people are going to say the 2 penalties on Davidson were a big negative, but I think the fact that he was playing so much early in the game and Riley came in late was pretty telling yesterday. Yeah,
and one of those penalties was a little overkill from the refs. I think they're just trying to make sure these guys know, like, you can't play dirty, you can't hit the quarterback, that kind of thing. I mean, if anything, this is the time of year I don't mind a defensive lineman like that to play with a little bit of extra attitude and a little bit extra, punch to the gut. for a quarterback. But Davidson is a guy, if he can stay healthy, he's had a couple durability issues himself. Did he walk off an injury yesterday, Eric?
He got dinged yesterday.
Okay.
It looked like
That's
it
what I
was
thought as well.
it was like a hand issue.
But then somebody said it was he got poked in the eye or something.
Okay.
I don't know what it was.
Nothing serious though.
We'll have to see. Just so I'm real curious too, because I haven't seen enough of him yet because he's been in and out of the lineup. And maybe so you can't really comment. Ryder Anderson. I know you just mentioned about inside-outside flexibility. It seems like the Giants announcers are trying to talk him up a little bit. Have you seen some things from him that encourage you? Maybe I'm looking at the wrong things. I don't see it yet, but maybe I'm missing something.
I see it in practice, and I haven't been there this year, but when I've seen him, he was a undrafted free agent in 2022, and he was a guy that I said, hey, he's going to make this roster. I remember watching him and Leonard Williams, and they almost looked similar against different levels of competition and practice together. And I think I actually remember talking to him about him with you, Eric, that I just saw, hey, there's something there with him. And that it's easy to get excited about someone in a practice, in a training camp environment, because you see the height, the weight, the tools. He's got heavy hands. He can bend. But when it comes to what we've seen on the field with him on game day against starting caliber offensive linemen, we don't see a lot of one-on-one wins. We see hustle plays, which are important, but I want to see him win one-on-one, and I haven't seen him do that on a consistent basis yet.
In Rodgers, you see more as a practice squad player, I would assume right now.
Yeah, fun player to watch, high energy, same thing. I don't know if he's going to win a ton one-on-one, but again, an interesting athletic profile that I think is worth looking into for a practice squad spot.
So when we look at that group, is it possible though that this might be another group that maybe we look for somebody on the waiver wire who just kind of fits a need, is a little bit different than the kind of collective similarity that we have right now?
I do, especially with a new defensive scheme, one that really does favor and have a specific profile for guys up front. I think Bob Papa was saying the Giants are going to be 6th on the waiver wire order. I think that's something that needs to be paid attention to. That means they're going to, if there's a defensive lineman that shakes free and they want to add to this group, that's where I think they would use it. Corner's another option as well. I'm sure we'll get to those guys as well. But to me, this defense is going to very much rely on what these guys can do up front, because I don't think you're going to find anyone. Stephon Gilmore, I think, just signed with Minnesota this morning, where you're not going to go find a corner that's really going to fit. If you do have an issue there, we still need to figure that out. That's where I think they're most vulnerable. You can't solve that issue by hoping to get someone on the waiver wire. I think it's going to be more about getting more bodies up front to put pressure on the quarterback.
So with that in mind, we can switch to the outside. We know what we have in Burns and Thibodeau at the moment. So maybe let's not focus on those guys. Let's take a look at the group behind them and what we have, because it's kind of a hodgepodge of, well, maybe they will be there, maybe they won't, depending on who else might shake free. You mentioned Boogie Basham, which I thought I had listed. I wrote it down last week. As I was watching the game against Detroit, I wrote him down as a Jag, not to be insulting. He's just another guy. But by the end of the game, I was like, you know what? He's actually doing more than I thought. And Ojulari really was quiet. Ojulari looked a little bit better later yesterday, but I'm still not seeing that guy show me. So your thoughts on what's behind Burns and Thibodeau?
Not much, and again, what are you looking for? Are you looking for real guys that can make a difference? That's what I want. I'm from that Ernie Corsi era where I really started getting into this, where you cannot have enough really good pass rushers. It's not possible to have too many of them. So my barometer for your number 3 outside guy is pretty high. I don't see it in Ojulari. I think the lower body issues, and he had a knee issue coming out of Georgia that wasn't very public. So it's not that it's just been a recent issue with him. And you can keep compiling lower body issues with a player that is very much built on explosion, burst, initial movement. That's a problem. I know his power game has improved a little bit, but those guys to me are someone you could find on any roster. And I hate to say, because I know a lot of people got excited about Ojulari, and I know Carl Banks still talks him up as someone that could be a guy, but I think they had 2 Jags, just another guy sitting behind Thibodeau and Burns. And that's how I felt coming into the offseason. I still feel that way now. And I haven't seen anything that would change my mind against backup offensive linemen over the past couple of weeks.
And the other guys I think they've got right now who flashed a bit against Detroit, I think they kind of took a step back yesterday.
Yep.
I personally thought Ovi Ogofu, I can't pronounce his name, but I
Same.
think he had issues at the edge. I thought it was odd they played Timmy Horn outside on the end a lot, and he got controlled. So a lot of these runs that happened in the second half of the game, I was like, there were guys that are probably not going to be on this roster. So I sort of tried to tell fans, don't get too upset with, there were a lot of players yesterday that played even early that aren't going to be on this roster. So you kind of have to take like a Breon Borders in the secondary, that type of thing. So
Yeah.
I didn't see, I wanted to see something more from Aziz yesterday and from Boogie, who again, he had a couple of plays where I noticed him, but then he didn't really stand out. So I think, like, I agree with Cy. I think there's just a bunch of guys there.
Right.
And I think that's the one area. I think there are other areas like corner, but I think that's really the one area they're going to really look at the waiver wire. I think if somebody is made available that has any pass rush ability, they're going to jump on him.
You have to keep in mind, this is going to be a defensive scheme that will not blitz a lot. I think we might still be in this Wink Martindale mode of like, hey, just send more bodies and that'll make a difference. That's not going to happen with Shane Bowen. And so that means these four guys that you put up front, they have to beat one-on-one blocking by themselves. And if they can't do it in preseason against second and third stringers, you're going to have to at some point start to look elsewhere.
So if that's the case, though, now you've got another problem. I'm going to step from the outside more to the inside.
Yeah.
Our inside linebackers are very thin. Okereke was playing way too long yesterday. I was shocked that he was still in there. McFadden goes down. We don't know how long that's going to be. Adams, I think he had a groin as well, although he looked like that first they took him off because of the shot that I had. But so he has a groin. So now you've got two. We'll got one with a hip, one with a groin. Carter Coughlin's coming off. Being injured, so he's never really done much of anything other than special, so it's hard to say you could count on this guy to play. Are you more concerned with the backups on the outside or our overall inside group?
That's a good question. I think the backups at both spots are thin. I think you can hide an issue at inside linebacker easier than you can hide an issue at outside linebacker. So to answer your question, I would say I'm a little bit more concerned about what's behind Kayvon and Brian Burns. But, there are some young bodies inside that you still have a little bit of intrigue with. The 6th-round pick, Darius Musow, and Deontay Johnson is a name that keeps coming up that, I will say this, spoiler alert for the game review, big loser of the day with Darren Beavers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's my dud. He's one of my duds.
Yeah. I mean, that was an opportunity of a lifetime. And like, making simple mistakes too. I mean, he's not the best athlete when it comes to a change of direction and coverage, but tackle the guy, wrap your arms around him. You can't be missing tackles like that because the door's open for you. But if you don't walk through, that's no one's fault.
Well, and Cy, I didn't think it was just the tackling. I thought he took terrible angles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. He tested athletically very well, but it does not carry over to tape. And part of it is the angles, the instincts. What our defensive guy at Ourlads, he was a linebacker coach in college. Like his eyes are only looking forward. He doesn't have the eyes that go sideways. You need to see out of your ear holes is what he says. And he doesn't have that. The best linebackers do. So that's going to be an issue for him.
I think, and my last comment on this is I think I'm a little more optimistic about the inside linebackers if the injury situation isn't too bad. So I think if you have Micah McFadden and Okereke as your starters and you have a Deontay Johnson and a Musow as your backups, I think you're okay there. But that's provided Deontay Johnson comes back in a week or two, maybe 3. Again, you don't need him right away unless there's another injury. I also throw out this, and Cy may really disagree with me this. I know he's tiny, but I really like what I've seen from Musow so far. Just instinctively, he just seems to be when they're getting off the pile, he seems to always be at the bottom of the pile to me. He just seems to always be there.
Similar to McFadden, my question with him will just be the pure speed and athletic ability to reach the outside against the outside runs. Where are we throwing Isaiah Simmons in here?
I'm glad you mentioned.
I don't even know what to call him.
I was going to ask that question because Eric just mentioned McFadden, but we don't know how long McFadden might be out. We don't. So it could be longer. And if that's the case, and let's say Johnson's a few weeks away, let's say he's not ready for week 1, can Simmons drop back? Can he play inside if you needed to him for a while? I can tell you he should not be playing slot corner. Not against John Mechie, that is for sure.
Mechie was a problem yesterday for the Giants.
He's one of my favorite stories in the league right now. I hope he does well. I'm rooting for him.
Oh yeah, because he was a nightmare for the Giants yesterday. He was like, if I was going to have a studs list for Texans, I would put him on number one. So
absolutely.
So what is your thoughts on Simmons in general? Like, I mean, he is kind of a guy without a true position.
Yeah. I mean, that's what he entered the NFL with. I mean, was he a safety? Was he an inside linebacker? Was he an outside linebacker? I've always selfishly wanted to see him as a pure outside rush linebacker and just see what he could do there, because he has the body, has the burst, he's physical enough. But, you know, the intrigue of him being able to cover tight ends it's always there. And he can be a tough guy to throw near because he's so long and he can make plays on the ball. But he's one of those guys where, you know, you'll love his highlight reel, but if you watch him play to play, he really can hurt a defense. And that's why I don't think he'll ever be a full-time player. So if someone were to go down, if McFadden is down for an extended period of time, he's not the answer. I don't think it changes his role at all. You know, his best fit on this defense can be as an extra pass rusher, which Bowen will not use often, or someone that can cover some tight ends. And, you know, the way the offenses are constructed in the NFL right now, if they see a guy like that on the field for coverage purposes, they can manipulate the scheme and the offense and the personnel to make sure that he's covering a John Mechie. It's just, that's how the league works now. And that's going to be something that the Giants, people much smarter than me, are going to have to figure out, because there is a usage for him. But if you want me to put a number on it, it's probably 15 snaps a game.
Did you find it odd in any way in Hard Knocks that they made a point to mention what could you do with a guy who really hadn't done, I mean, he hadn't done a lot. So, and they made a point to say that, and he brought, I could really use that guy. Was that kind of surprising to you?
Yeah. I mean, the thought of Simmons has always been better than what we've seen on the field. And that was dating back to his days at Clemson. You like the idea of him. I remember he was one of the guys that people thought the Giants should take with their draft slot. And I remember saying this back then, the idea of him is awesome, you know, like, and that's what can make you on that Hard Knocks episode, the idea of what he could be. I think what they call him, star linebacker or something like that, where it's kind of like a mix of an outside linebacker, nickel, safety type. But when it comes to how practical it is and what you actually do with him play to play, and what if an offense switches out of their look, you know, it becomes a liability rather than an asset.
So go ahead, Eric, please.
I was going to say, probably sticking with the secondary, because we've taken up so much of your time. Thoughts on the cornerback situation? It was interesting. I think they did miss Andrew Phillips yesterday. I think he's going to be their nickel, and I think that hurt them a little bit in the game. There was an opportunity for some guys to play yesterday to make a statement, and I think some people, not as bad as Beavers, but they had an opportunity to make a statement, and maybe they didn't. But I don't want to influence your thoughts on this. But
I mean, my number one thought is, and I didn't know if I should put anyone on the dud list because they're third, fourth, fifth string corners, but you know, I mean, Christian Holmes got burned multiple times. We saw Trey Herndon even lose a few times. Breon Borders got burned a couple times. I mean, these guys look like they're not even fast enough. And then I forgot Darnay Holmes was even on the team. You know, he was on the field late in the game. And, you know, it's that cornerback room. And this goes to show this, we're not breaking any news here. Watching Hard Knocks, the cornerback room is going to make this defensive staff very stressed out. It stressed them out in the draft. It stressed them out after the draft with what to do and who to sign. It's a really tough position to scout. I've always struggled scouting corners. It's a really tough position to project talent and find those hidden gems. And so far, the Giants are whiffing. And and it's one thing to whiff when you're looking for backup corners, but I'm not sure they even have 3 starting corners yet, because I consider the nickel a starting spot on defense. Deonte Banks, I think we're okay with him. Don't care that much about the Nico Collins play yesterday. He lost his footing. But Drew Phillips, rookie, hopefully he'll be okay. But again, still a rookie. I don't know if I want Nick McLeod starting out there. You know, I like him as an accessory secondary piece. But from there, I mean, these guys might be forced into action. And it's a group that I think is going to cause a lot of problems this year.
Yeah, and I thought, you know, they said that Trey Hawkins in the first game was their defensive player of the game. And people are going to remember that one missed tackle, but there was other missed tackle that I saw from him in the game as well, too. And it's disappointing. And I'm not completely writing him off, but what disappoints me is he's so big for the cornerback position. He should be a better tackler than he is. He's a big guy, and I want to. He tackles like a little guy, and I don't like that. He seems almost afraid to tackle at times. So that was disappointing to me yesterday. And I agree with you. I don't think McLeod is your ideal fit. I think you can survive with him out there, but I don't think he's the guy you want to roll with as your start.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, Hawkins, he got beat laterally a lot on any sort of crossing route. He was 3 steps behind. And then he throws in the tackling issues. And then you consider the fact that he was burned as many times. He got beat so bad last year as a rookie. And again, you want to give him some grace being a 6th-round pick from Old Dominion, being forced. Remember when the Giants had him covering Tyreek Hill down the field last year? But, you want to give him some grace here. But, if you're going to ask me to take out, the long-term thoughts of this team, this 2024 roster is going to be burned by this cornerback group unless someone steps up. And then through 2 games, nobody has stepped up.
Are you surprised Darnay Holmes is buried? Was at least in this game was buried? Because it seems to me, again, I don't think he's the answer, but I just think he's better than a lot of the other players you just mentioned. And maybe they were just wanting to get a look at these other players and they know what they have in Darnay Holmes. But Darnay's flashed to me 2 games in a row as a gunner. And I think he's better than some of the other guys that have been playing. I'd rather, if I was playing a game tomorrow, I know I'd play him over Trey Hawkins right now. Not that he's great. It's just I feel a little more safe with him out there.
Yeah, and I think they probably feel the same way, Eric. I think they know what Darnay Holmes is, and they know what he is not. And some of these other guys, they probably need to find out, do they have a diamond in the rough in a Breon Borders or a Trey Herndon or David Long Jr.? I think Darnay Holmes is going to be that backup plan B if these guys don't pan out, which is more than likely going to be the case.
Yeah, and one of the things that was weird yesterday was, so in practice, when Andrew Phillips has been out this week, they've had Simmons and David Long play the nickel. But David Long didn't play yesterday. He was one of the healthy scratches, unless there was something late that we didn't hear of. But he practiced all week. He wasn't on the injury list. And when I saw who didn't play, David Long was one of the players that didn't play. So maybe they know what they have in him, and they didn't. Again, they wanted to look at the other corners. I don't know, but it's odd that David didn't play.
I was thinking the same thing. I kept on looking for number 20. I watched this game 3 times already, and they did have the all 22 up this morning, so I couldn't find 20 at all. And then I noticed that there were no snaps for him. So, he is a corner that has starting experience. He has started multiple games in the NFL, and he's actually had flash a little bit as well. So, yeah, I don't want to speculate. There could be an injury there or something popped up pregame that I'm not sure about. Or what we're saying, they want to get looks at these other guys.
And it was weird to me that Breon Borders was in the game so early. So at that point, I was thinking, they're taking a look at people. I don't think he's making this team. And I don't even know if he's making the practice squad. So
agreed.
Yeah.
So with that, let's kind of, because we are taking up a ton of your time, let's just real quick over the safeties. I mean, I think we've got at least a trio that we know for sure. You got Pinnock, we've got Belton, and we've got Newbin, and you kind of can arrange them. I think Pinnock will be for now will be the set piece. The other 2 could be going in and out. Your thoughts on which one of those should be with Pinnock, and are we looking at eventually down the road? Is it Newbin Belton or is Pinnock really kind of the guy we will go forward with?
Pinnock is the guy. I even think Newbin's the other guy. I think it's already signed, sealed, delivered. Yeah. Belton did not play well yesterday. Another one with really bad angles, horrific holding penalty in the end zone against Dalton Schultz, a average moving tight end that he could not stick with. He's someone that gets you excited because of how physical he is, how well he can play downhill. But when it comes to feel, movement and coverage, fluidity, anticipation, which is such a big part of safety, which is what we see already in Tyler Newbin, he doesn't have it. And I think that's going to be a guy that before midseason, maybe even before week 1, guys, that he's the number 3 guy behind Newbin and Pinnock.
I think Belton lost his starting job yesterday. Yeah. I do. Yeah. I mean, it's just a matter of time at this point. And again, I think Belton has a role on this team.
Absolutely.
He has a nose for the football. So I'm not saying, so some listeners out there might be saying, well, we got to get rid of Belton right now. I'm
Right,
not
no.
saying that. And we didn't see Javarius Owens yesterday because of injury. And I think he's an interesting player. The only other guy I want to hear Cy's thoughts on, and maybe, again, I was trying to rush through this because I had so much going on yesterday, but the guy that kind of kept popping up in my notes at times was Alex Johnson. So again, not a guy that I think will make the 53, but I think an interesting guy that you might want to keep around on the practice squad.
Yeah, Johnson is, I remember talking about the undrafted free agents right after the draft, and I said he was probably one of 2 or 3 guys that would have a realistic shot at making the roster, because of the way the roster is constructed, who the Giants have in the secondary room, and what they lost this past season. And also I believe he was the 2nd or 3rd highest paid undrafted free agent for the Giants. And that's something you could always keep an eye on. Didn't see much that's going to move the needle positive or negative, which I hate to say it. It's not a cop out, but that happens a lot preseason football. You just don't have enough snaps on guys. So I haven't seen enough of him to say like, hey, he could be a guy that can make this roster, or he could be the answer as to why they dropped Jalen Mills. I don't see anything that would move the needle in that direction yet. But I'll definitely keep an eye on him in the next week, because I think next week is where we're going to really see the back end of the roster formulate.
Would you play Daniel Jones next week?
I would.
Oof.
I would. Yeah. I would play him a similar amount to what I just played him. And I will actually say I'd be surprised if they don't, because you have the 2 weeks before you got plenty of time before week 1 against Minnesota. And it seems to me, after last year, the front office and the coaching staff are leaning a little harder towards, we got to get these guys on the field. This team is awful at starting games. They have scored the least amount of points in first quarters of any team in football over the past 2 years, the 2 years that Brian Daboll has been here. I actually have a couple numbers too that I think I remember from last year writing this down. The Giants, when they're winning at halftime, are 11-2-1 since Daboll has taken over, 5-17 when they don't. And they are the worst first quarter offense in football over the past 2 years.
I believe.
And I think this team needs to get past the, hey, let's just stay alive until maybe we get hot in the second half or we get lucky. This team needs to start off on fire, not only from a macro season perspective, but a week-to-week perspective. And I think just watching them throw the ball downfield yesterday and reading all these reports that they're really pushing the ball downfield in practice right now, I think that's going to be a point of emphasis. And that's why I think they should and will play next week.
Yeah, Daboll said after the game, he said it was a point of emphasis in the Houston game to go max protect at times and take shots down the field. I thought that was very interesting. Before you go, Dave, this was asked on the site. It's a great question. It's been a tough question. It's going to put you on the spot because everything, this is my opinion, so much changes in a college football season. You look at you look at the top prospects going into a season, and it always changes based on a college season. But the question came up, who are the quarterbacks? I know they're not right now. The narrative is it's a weak class. There's not a lot out there, but who's the guy, if you right now, as of August, which is not fair to you, as of August, who's your guy that, man, I hope the Giants have a shot at?
Man, I mean, I love being put in the spot like that. It's like I said, I don't mind putting my neck out there, and I'll acknowledge if I'm wrong about it.
And it changes, and it will change,
especially now.
Right. So your answer is going to be different in December. I know.
Yeah. So. I'm going to give you a guy that I feel safe with, and a guy that I'm kind of putting my neck out there a little bit on, but I need to see him play. But the guy I feel safe with right now is what a lot of people say is Carson Beck from Georgia, just because I think he's a very underrated athlete. I think he's the best at ball placement and anticipation throws. And the more you watch the best quarterbacks play in today's NFL, anticipation is a number one trait of all these guys. And I think he does that at a really high level. One of the reasons why Brock Bowers was so good after the catch is what we talked about earlier today in this podcast. That is a quarterback stat as well. And Carson Beck does that. He puts the ball where it needs to be put on all 3 levels of the route tree. But a name that I am looking forward to watching the most, and I think based on a couple of the guys that I talked to, no one's putting him up in this discussion yet, is Jalen Milroe from Alabama. Because there's no question he is a Lamar caliber athlete. And I said that about Jaden Daniels. At this time last year, we were talking about Jaden Daniels as a first rounder. Nobody said he was, and he ends up going number 2 overall. Jalen Milroe is not as developed or as polished as a passer as Jaden, but he is the elite Lamar caliber athlete at 225 pounds. And if you look at some deep metrics of down the field passing, Jalen Milroe was more accurate and more productive on a per pass basis than every quarterback that was taken early last year when it came to throwing the ball downfield. So we're not talking about a kid that cannot throw the ball downfield. They just didn't throw it often down the field. And he does look raw a lot when dropping back. So that's where I want to see development there. But if I even see a little bit of development as a pure pocket passer going through reads and footwork, that will be a really, really hot superstar type name in the coming months.
And what do we know about Dable's background, and even from Hard Knocks, his Alabama connections?
Right.
Oh yeah, Alabama connections.
So you know he's going to be asking questions about behind the scenes about him too.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I have not heard a bad thing about Jalen Milroe yet when it comes to off the field stuff. New offense this year too, with Nick Saban leaving town, the guy from Washington coming over. So he's going to be in that Michael Penix offense this year.
Yeah.
Man, I tried to set myself up to be really smart. I wrote down what I thought you were going to say. I thought you were going to say Cam Ward. So I was like,
I'm not there yet on him.
Okay.
Fun player though. Fun player. Who I'm not high on is Shedeur Sanders. I can't get behind that yet.
Got you. So, let's wrap it up. I did want to ask one question. You were mentioning, Eric asked a question about Jones playing, and your thought is he should play. We used to have a really good feel across the league of when it was 4 games. The third game was the game where the starters would play the most time. The fourth game, pretty much nobody played. As time went on, nobody played. Now it's 3 games, and it's the second game and then the third game. This past weekend, there were a number of teams that did not play. The Bills didn't play Josh Allen. I noticed a bunch of others didn't play their guys. I think even the Vikings didn't even play Sam Darnold. I'm like, how could you not play Sam Darnold?
Yeah, especially new offense.
So it's a really odd structuring, but you've already answered the question, but your full belief with the way things are with the Giants and how they really need to develop, those guys got to play. What are your thoughts on how long you play them?
Good question. I hate saying like a quarter or half, because you could see a quarter where these guys play 6 plays. Like I think I'm thinking like a amount of snaps, first team offense, everyone out there, I'd say 25 snaps.
Yeah.
So that it can equate to about maybe a little less than the first half, but more than the first quarter. That's kind of where I would put it. I am a little old school, a little bit of an old soul with a lot of things with football and building a team and roster and culture and all that. But I'm not a play scared type. I'm just not. And, I know fully well Malik Neighbors can get hurt. Don't kill me for saying that. Knock on wood, everybody. But I know that's a possibility, but that's sport, guys. That is sport. And I don't want to see the worst first quarter offense in football 2 straight years, make it 3 straight years. And part of that is these guys need to play and develop chemistry with each other, especially a new offensive line.
My last comment or question is this, kind of both, is I want to get your views on what my reaction is to seeing the starting defense playing early in the game is kind of what I thought it was going to be. It's going to be bend but don't break.
Yeah.
And I think Giants fans are going to have to get a little used to I think it's a league-wide trend, this style of defense. It's basically don't give up the big play, make the other team drive the field. They'll get a holding penalty or a negative play that hopefully will stop them. But I think the tight ends are going to be, based on yesterday, I think we're going to see the tight ends might be an issue for the Giants this year. But am I off in saying this defense really is going to be sort of don't give up the big play, make them drive the field, and then get tough in the red zone, which is what we saw yesterday?
I think you're exactly right. And I think you're exactly right. You have a pulse in the league, because that's what a lot of defensive play callers are. That's why I think Wink Martindale's not in the league right now, to be honest with you. I don't think he likes to play like that. And I think the league is shifting more towards that mindset. Whether you like the analytics that are getting into the game of football right now or not, I use it for information, not to make decisions. But something that does come across over the past few years and looking back on history as well is that explosive play rate, meaning how often these guys are creating big plays, is a direct correlation to wins. It's one of the biggest correlations to winning and losing in football is how many explosive plays you create on offense and how many you give up on defense. I mean, it's turnovers, sack differential, and explosive play differential. And that's something that I think everyone is starting to kind of get a hold of. And you want to know who the least explosive offense in football is over the past 2 years? The New York Giants.
Well, it's interesting. I will recommend this to the fans too. If you go to NFL.com after a game and download the game book, it has all the stats from that particular game. The very last thing listed are the big plays by each team, the top yardage gain plays. And it's startling when you see Giants games, what the opponent did and what the Giants did. It's the difference between the number of big plays, I think, hits the nail on the head with what Cy was just talking about. Is those chunk yardage plays are so important to having an explosive offense. I mean, it sounds like an obvious statement, but it's even more appropriate than I think you even realize.
Yeah, it is. It's something that you can easily keep an eye on throughout the season. Is how explosive is this offense? Is it turning into more wins? More often than not, it will.
So, well, why don't we we'll wrap it up with you, Cy. First off, thank you. You've been on for quite a while. Let everybody know where they can find you, across social media and anywhere else that you might be.
Yeah. So on Twitter, my Twitter handle is Ourlads_Cy. That's SY. I'm as active as I can be, considering the fact that this is still a part-time gig. But in relation to the Giants, Eric is thankful for him for giving me the opportunity to write the Giants game reviews every week. So every single Giants win and loss, I'll have pretty much a complete breakdown of every position. And then at the end, which I've been told is what some people just skip over and read to, is kind of some closing thoughts on the Giants and also closing thoughts on the team that they just played against. There's a stud and dud list, 3 studs, 3 duds. Sometimes it's hard to hold myself to those numbers. Unfortunately, I have a lot more duds than studs the Giants over the past few years, but it's something that you guys can rely basically within 36 hours of that game ending is usually like I try to give my personal deadline to myself so that you guys can rely on some sort of timetable of when to have a game report ready. So, I am going to try to have the Giant game review done by tonight for Eric, and he'll do whatever he wants with it after he proofreads it. So, that's something. And then on, the Ourlads, we just started a YouTube channel. We're still trying to getting our feet under us with trying to find a rhythm with what to do. It is very draft centered, but I do come out with a weekly NFL all rookie team. And that takes a long time as well. I really break down what rookies are doing around the league, because I know a lot of you guys, like Eric, could speak to this. The most amount of traffic you get is during draft time outside of the season, right? So it's fun to, read reports, who's coming to the league, but we kind of lose track of, because, not everyone has time to keep track of what every rookie is doing around the league. So you guys can check that all rookie team every week on the YouTube channel, the Ourlads YouTube channel, to see what rookies are really standing out amongst others around the league.
And Cy also does an outstanding. So Cy is a huge part of the content of BBI, not just because of the game reviews, which everybody looks forward to. And I have to admit, first thing to do is look at the studs and duds and then go back. But it's also, he does breakdowns before the draft of every position, and they're fantastic. And again, I know it sounds like I'm blowing smoke up as what, but if you go back and look at his predictions, his previews, they're more on than they're off. I mean, again, everybody has their misses, and they're the Evan Neals of the world, and quarterbacks are a nightmare for the league. I mean, the league can't figure out quarterbacks.
Yeah, let's not bring up Josh Rosen.
Yes, but that's a league-wide issue. One of the best parts of Hard Knocks, even though it looked choreographed, was them going through the last quarterbacks in the 10 years that were selected. It's tough, but if you go back, and I will go back from time to time, because if we pick up a player, and I'll be like, damn, Cy nailed this one. You know, even if you go back to guys like Kadarius Toney, it's you know, things like that, or you know, the guys that are on the roster like a Daniel Jones, you know, the red flags that were a little bit there. So so anyways, I say this because Cy is a tremendous asset, and again, everybody, no one's perfect, but his batting average I'll take over anybody right now. So
thanks, Eric.
Yeah.
So with that, Cy, I appreciate you coming on. I think we probably can wrap up the show in general. It's been we always do. We always go longer than we say we're ever going to go. And but I appreciate it. We'll catch up. We'll catch you online. I'll link everything in the description. And yeah, let's call this for Inside BBI with John and Eric and Cy as the guest. Let's call it a close on the show, and we'll catch up with you. Look forward to your reviews, and geez, let's hope we have a few more studs during games and a lot less duds. And if the duds, please just don't let it be entire positional groups. So I appreciate it. Everybody, thanks you for the listen. Do, if you can, like, subscribe. We appreciate it. And then do the same for our lads as well. And it'll be linked in the description. With that, we'll catch you again next time.